Following the supposed earthquake that brought to end the Old Palace period on Crete at about 1700 BCE, the subsequent period was that of rebuilding and reaffirming the political and economic dominance of the Minoan civilization in the Aegean Sea and beyond. In this episode, we will go through the New Palace period, which represented the apex of the Cretan power and influence, an era that many ancient historians later labeled as the establishment of the world's first thalassocracy. Soon after the old palaces of Knossos, Phaistos, Mallia and Zakros were destroyed, major rebuilding projects were initiated throughout the island. As the Minoan civilization had already established the trade routes that allowed it to dominate the Aegean Sea, it was of crucial importance to have them preserved, and during the early 17th century BCE, the Minoans seem to have been lucky enough not to have a rival power that would capitalize on their weakness. The coastal Asia Minor still served as the vital part of the Minoan commerce, where the Cretans had in the previous centuries already established the trading post of Miletus, which served as the main Cretan colony in the area. Also to the north, the city of Troy was growing in the commercial importance as well, and represented an important point of export of the Minoan pottery. On the mainland Greece, the emerging Mycenaeans began to establish themselves on the Peloponnese, with their main city, Mycenae, soon becoming a partner in the Minoan trade network, which only continued to grow and expand despite the recent setback. By 1650 BCE, many of the Cretan cities were significantly expanded, with the palaces at Knossos, Phaistos and Mallia completely rebuilt to a much larger and grander scale than before, thus marking the beginning of the New Palace period on Crete. The palace of the capital city of Knossos was by far the largest and represented the height of the Minoan architecture. The complex around the main building covered the area of over 6 acres, with the monumental staircase connecting the different levels of the palace, which was up to 5 stories high. It contained numerous storage chambers, treasury rooms, bathrooms, toilets, and over 1,300 other rooms, as well as a well-built drainage system. A theater was also erected within the complex, accommodating around 400 spectators, where various ceremonies and rituals were held. At the heart of the palace were the administrative, ceremonial, and ritual chambers, decorated with luxurious items and colorful frescoes, showing all the wealth and power of the Minoan capital, which at this time numbered as many as 100,000 inhabitants. By 1600 BCE, all of the main palace centers on Crete were fully rebuilt on a scale larger than in the old palace era, with their cities expanded and population increased. In addition to the rebuilt palaces, a number of country villas with small surrounding settlements were established across the island. These villas were richly decorated with frescoes and other features of the Minoan art, suggesting residential area of either political or religious elites, possibly overlooking the less urbanized areas of the island. As the wealth of the Minoans appeared to have reached its height, so did their political power, with the new Cretan colonies established at Rhodes and Thera, which were now much like the Cycladic Islands integrated into the Minoan Thalassocracy, while the rest of the Aegean was deeply influenced by the expanding Minoan culture. This influence did not stop within the Aegean, as the features of the Minoan cultural presence also appear on more distant locations such as Cyprus, where the Cypro-Minoan syllabic script appears from the 16th century BCE, likely derived from the Minoan Linear A writing system. It's very likely that it was this very period that had influenced the creation of later Greek myths of King Minos and his sea empire, centered around the city of Knossos, where the legendary Minotaur resided in a giant maze called the Labyrinth. King Minos was described as the founder of the legendary Cretan navy that dominated the Aegean Sea and exercised hegemony over numerous islands and coastal cities, one of which was said to have been none other than the city of Athens. The very word thalassocracy was first used by the ancient Greek writers to describe the government of the Minoans that had firmly ruled the seas during the generations of the heroic age. These myths and stories were likely fragments of memory that the people of the Aegean had centuries later still preserved of this Minoan period. The Minoans themselves seemingly managed to keep their hegemony intact with minimal use of warfare. Apart from a significant navy that the Cretans had likely maintained in order to keep control of the region, there is very little evidence of the existence of a standing Minoan army. Although many weapons such as daggers, swords and axes were found on the island dating to this period, many of those were lavishly decorated and far less prominent than in other Bronze Age cultures. In addition to this, there seems to be little evidence of warfare both on Crete and in other areas where the Cretan influence was established. It was likely that the Cretan navy was big and powerful enough to deter any potential threat to the Minoan interests in the Aegean Sea, while Crete's geographical position made it logistically impossible for any potential distant enemy to strike. However, just as it had been the case in the past, it would not be a human enemy to strike the first blow at the Cretan thalassocracy. Instead, it would be the power of nature that would rattle the Minoan civilization once again. Sometime between 16 and 1500 BCE, the volcanic eruption of Thera destroyed much of this Aegean island, together with its Minoan center, Crete, which was wiped out from the existence. The archaeologists have traditionally dated this event to about 1500 BCE. However, the more recent radiocarbon dating suggests an earlier period, likely a date closer to 1600 BCE. Either way, this event devastated the Minoans, who, although probably avoiding major destruction on Crete itself, nevertheless suffered a severe blow, one of which they would never fully recover. The Cycladic Islands, which represented the most vital part of the Minoan trade network, were completely devastated, and the great Cretan fleet that was patrolling the Aegean Sea was no more. The Minoans, nevertheless, remained a powerful civilization throughout the following century, but unlike the previous catastrophe that had destroyed the infrastructure and not the economy, this time the Minoan economy was severely damaged. And unlike the previous time, where there was no potential enemy to seize the opportunity at the time of the Minoan weakness, this time the enemy was ready and waiting. Please consider subscribing and sharing the video, as this is a one-person production and it greatly helps the visibility of the channel. Special thanks to History with Sai, Nico, Panayotis Yiannopoulos, Fred Leckie, and Estate Care for their continuous support. If you wish to become a Patreon member, please click the link in the video description. This was WanaxTV, and we'll see you again soon.